Leaning back in his leather seat on a private jet, Adrian Cole gazed out the window at the endless blue sky. Underneath his confident exterior, a subtle wave of anxiety simmered. He was returning to his old neighborhood after nearly a decade away. 10 years of forging a global tech empire, traveling the world, and transforming into a man that people called a genius, a visionary, and in some corners, a ruthless billionaire. He hardly recognized the boy he'd been, a skinny dreamer who lived in a cramped row house with his single mom in Lakeside Heights, a working-class neighborhood about an hour from the heart of the city. Back then, he'd poured every spare moment into self-taught coding, saving pocket change for used computers at garage sales. Even after the success that launched him into the stratosphere, he still remembered those late nights, typing lines of code by a dim lamp, hearing the rattle of the nearby train yard through his window. Now, at 29, Adrian was a household name in the tech world. His company, Coltech, developed cutting-edge AI software, boasting billions in valuation. But as the plane began its descent toward a private airstrip, he felt more vulnerable than he had in years. He hadn't told many people about his trip, a low-key return, just him and his small security detail. He wanted to see Lakeside Heights as it was, not as a media spectacle. When he stepped off the jet, his longtime personal assistant Monica greeted him near the tarmac. "Your car is waiting, Mr. Cole? Ready to head to your old neighborhood?" He nodded, running a hand through his neatly trimmed dark hair. "I told you, Monica, call me Adrian outside the office. We're in my hometown now." She smiled, adjusting her glasses. "Of course, Adrian. Are you sure you don't want me to come along? I could carry schedules, arrange stops." He shook his head. "No need. I want to be alone for this." She handed him a small folder. "All right, I've compiled some local contacts, a few city council members, your old teachers, and so on. If you decide to do something philanthropic, these will help." He took the folder, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Thanks, Monica. I'll see you back at the hotel tomorrow. Enjoy your day off." Soon after, Adrian climbed into the waiting car, a sleek black sedan driven by a local hire. The driver, a friendly older man named Vince, gave him a polite nod. Adrian requested minimal security presence. Only an unmarked SUV would follow at a discreet distance. A pang of apprehension nagged at him. He hadn't visited Lakeside Heights since his mother's funeral 8 years ago. Life had swept him along, an unstoppable whirlwind of college, startup chaos, and near-instant fortune. But a restlessness had begun to stir in him recently. He yearned to reconnect with his roots. Outside the car window, the city skyline faded into suburban sprawl. Adrian noticed the slow shift into more modest streets, smaller houses, older cars parked along curbs. At last, a sign welcomed them to Lakeside Heights, his old stomping ground. A swirl of nostalgia hit him. He instructed Vince to keep driving until they reached a row of narrow townhouses near the edge of an industrial zone. Here, battered fences and worn sidewalks told the story of a place that had seen better days. Yet there was a familiar comfort, a sense of belonging Adrian couldn't deny. "Stop here, please," Adrian said. Vince pulled over by a sagging telephone pole. Adrian stepped out, the midday sun illuminating the peeling paint of houses in front of him. A bit of crisp autumn air carried the sense of cooking, cut grass, and distant train exhaust. He took a few tentative steps down the sidewalk until he found the house that used to be his, a 2-story unit with chipped beige paint and a narrow front porch. In strode. Someone else lived there now. Pots of flowers he didn't recognize sat on the steps. A slight ache pinched his chest. Memories fluttered. Him and his mom sitting on those steps, sipping soda on hot nights. The neighborhood kids playing freeze tag in the street. He closed his eyes, inhaling deeply. Then he heard children's laughter. He turned to see a group of kids cycling past, weaving around potholes. One boy slowed, eyeing Adrian curiously. Adrian realized how out of place he might look in his tailored overcoat and polished shoes. He gave the boy a small wave, and the boy sped off, unconcerned. Some things never changed. Kids being kids, day in and day out. A pang of longing hit him. He was so removed from this life now, it almost felt like an alternate universe. He wondered if he'd run into any old neighbors or her, the girl he used to race bikes with, who'd scribble comic characters in the margins of his notebooks, who teased him about being too serious while also championing his ambitions. the friend he'd called Darcy. They'd parted ways after high school, promising to keep in touch. But life had intervened. He'd gone to college on a scholarship out of state, then launched Coltech, traveling endlessly. He'd heard she stayed in Lakeside Heights. At least, that was the rumor from a mutual friend who once contacted him. She might even still live here, Darcy Miller. The thought of seeing her again caused a flutter of anxiety and hope. He told himself it was a silly notion. She could be married or have moved away. Besides, he'd just come to reacquaint himself with home, maybe set up a philanthropic initiative to help the struggling area. That was all. Still, as he climbed back into the car, he caught himself picturing her in his mind's eye. Freckles across her cheeks, dark hair pinned in a messy ponytail, bright hazel eyes that always glowed with mischief. The recollection stirred something in him, a reminder of simpler times. He directed Vince to drive through the neighborhood to the local diner he remembered from his youth. Maybe he'd get lunch. Maybe he'd just watch. Either way, this day was about reconnecting, and in a corner of his heart, perhaps discovering if the friend he'd left behind was still around. Daly's diner hadn't changed much. The neon sign with a missing E still buzzed faintly in the window, and the parking lot's lines had all but faded. Adrian felt a surge of memories. Late-night milkshakes with Darcy, celebrating birthdays with half the neighborhood. He stepped inside, a bell jangling overhead. The interior was stuck in a time warp. Vinyl booths, checkerboard floors, and a laminated menu that likely still listed the same greasy burgers. A few patrons eyed Adrian curiously. He didn't fit the typical diner clientele in his expensive coat. He offered them a polite nod and slid into an empty booth by the window. A waitress approached, a stout woman in her 50s, silver hair pinned in a net. Her name tag read Bernice. She didn't recognize him, of course. "Hey there, hon, what can I get you?" Adrian hesitated, scanning the menu. "Coffee, black, and..." He glanced at the lunch specials, feeling nostalgic. "I'll try the bacon cheeseburger." Bernice scribbled it down. "Sure thing. Fries, too?" He nodded, smile tugging at his lips. "Yes, please. Extra crispy." She bustled off. Adrian gazed around, soaking in the comforting hum. A radio played softly in the background, an old rock station. A few old men in a corner booth chatted over newspapers. A mother tried to calm a fussy toddler by the front counter. Halfway through sipping his coffee, the bell chimed again, heralding a new arrival. Adrian glanced up and froze. Darcy Miller walked in. He recognized her instantly, even though she'd changed. Her once long hair was cut to shoulder length, and she dressed in simple jeans and a navy sweater. But that determined set of her shoulders, the lively gleam in her hazel eyes, and the freckles dotting her nose were unmistakable. Adrian's breath caught. She hadn't spotted him yet. She went to the cashier, rummaging in her bag. "I'm here to pick up 2 to-go orders for Miller Interiors," she told Bernice. Bernice checked a slip. "Sure thing, Darcy. You're a bit early, but I'll see if they're done." Adrian's heart pounded. She worked for some place called Miller Interiors? Or was it her own business? He had so many questions swirling in his head. Should he say hello or slip out unnoticed? A swirl of nerves took hold. For all his billionaire confidence in boardrooms, he felt like a nervous teenager again. Before he could decide, Darcy glanced around and locked eyes with him. She froze mid-step, lips parted in shock. For a split second, neither moved. Then her eyes widened with recognition, a mix of surprise and disbelief flooding her features. "Adrian Cole," she blurted, slowly moving toward his booth. "Is that really you?" He stood awkwardly, offering a tentative smile. "Yeah, it's me. Hey, Darcy." A breathy laugh escaped her, and before he knew it, she'd thrown her arms around him in a tight hug. The warmth of her embrace caught him off guard. He inhaled the faint scent of citrus shampoo, heart thudding in his chest. "Adrian," she repeated, her voice laced with awe. "You're actually here." He eased back, hands resting on her shoulders. "I am. This place hasn't changed a bit." She stared at him, eyes bright with curiosity and a trace of skepticism. I can't believe this. You in Lakeside Heights. What brings you back?" Adrian fumbled for words. "Wanted to see the old neighborhood, maybe do some philanthropic stuff, but mostly, I just realized it's been too long." Darcy shook her head slowly, a smile dawning on her face. "Wow, I'd heard rumors you were super successful, traveling the world, but I never expected you to walk back in here. Your name's all over the tech news. He scratched the back of his neck, feeling self-conscious. Yeah, Coltech has taken off. It's been a whirlwind. She laughed lightly. That's an understatement. She gestured for him to sit, then slid into the booth opposite him. You got a minute? I'd love to catch up. He nodded eagerly. Bernice soon returned with Adrian's burger, then gave Darcy an approving look, as if noticing the reunion. Darcy waved off the curious glance and focused on him. So, how's life as a big shot? She teased, though her eyes held genuine warmth. Adrian tried to relax. Stressful at times, but fulfilling. You know how I always wanted to build something innovative? I guess I did. She smiled. Good for you. Meanwhile, I'm still here, hustling. I started my own small interior design business, Miller Interiors. Mostly local clients, but it pays the bills. He perked up. That's amazing. I remember you always redecorating your bedroom, painting murals, rearranging furniture. Darcy laughed. It was a quirky hobby back then. Guess it turned into a career. I do small remodels, staging homes for sale, that sort of thing. She toyed with the edge of a napkin. Business is decent, but the neighborhood's struggling. Adrian's gaze turned serious. Yeah, I noticed. Still feels like people are working twice as hard for half as much. They fell into a comfortable exchange. She asked about his mom, and he explained she'd passed away years ago, something Darcy already knew from a mutual friend's message. Darcy pressed a hand to her chest. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you, she whispered, regret flickering in her eyes. He shook his head. No, I left too soon. Got wrapped up in college, startups, everything. I'm sorry I lost touch. She gave him a forgiving smile. We were kids, and life happened. I get it. They spoke about old neighbors, who had moved, who had kids now. Darcy had never married, and Adrian felt a strange relief at that news, though he tried to hide it behind a polite nod. She'd dated a few guys, but no one serious enough to settle down. Meanwhile, Adrian admitted he'd been too busy building his empire for any real commitment. Their conversation grew spirited, peppered with banter and fond recollections. The diner's bustle receded as they reconnected, laughter punctuating their stories. She teased him about his fancy coat, and he admitted feeling out of place. She joked that she'd have to reintroduce him to real neighborhood life, spontaneous block parties, local festivals, the best takeout spots. Eventually, Bernice called out, Darcy, your to-go orders are ready. Darcy sighed, glancing at Adrian wistfully. Duty calls. I've got to deliver these lunches to a work site. But can we meet again? I'd love to catch up more. His chest fluttered. I'd like that a lot. Here, take my number. He scrawled his direct phone on a diner napkin, ignoring how it felt both quaint and oddly thrilling. She tucked it into her purse, cheeks still slightly pink. I'll text you. Don't vanish again, she teased, standing up to leave. He smiled, half rising from the booth. I won't. With a final wave, she collected her bag and the to-go food, then slipped out the door. Adrian sank back into his seat, heart racing. He'd found Darcy again, and it felt both exhilarating and terrifying. In the whirlwind of success, he'd buried the memory of how her laughter made him feel alive, how her presence sparkled with energy. Finishing his burger, he paid the bill, left a generous tip, and stepped outside. Vince was waiting by the car. Adrian slid in, still lost in thought. As they pulled away, he looked back at Daly's diner, quietly marveling that the friend he'd thought he'd lost was now back in his life. And deep down, a tiny spark of hope glowed. Maybe it was more than just friendship pulling him toward her. That evening, Adrian settled into a suite at a downtown hotel, opulent with sweeping city views. Yet as he stared at the skyline, he found himself thinking not of the penthouse comfort, but of Darcy. He replayed their meeting at the diner, her teasing grin, the way she'd said his name like it was both familiar and new. He'd expected a polite greeting from old acquaintances upon returning, maybe some resentment that he hadn't done more for the community. Instead, Darcy welcomed him with open warmth. They'd bridged the years in mere minutes, though there was still so much to learn about who they'd become. The next day, he arranged a quiet drive through Lakeside Heights, wanting to see the changes more thoroughly. He brought along the folder Monica compiled, lists of local nonprofits, city council initiatives, possible revitalization projects. The more he explored, the clearer the area's decline became. Vacant storefronts, deteriorating streets, people leaving for better opportunities elsewhere. He recalled being that kid, longing to escape these limited prospects. But seeing it now, with fresh eyes and success behind him, he realized how much the community needed a helping hand. Perhaps he could channel some of his resources here. He'd done philanthropic work in other cities, but never in his own backyard. A swirl of determination rose in him. Mid-afternoon, Darcy texted, "Free tonight? I can show you the new community center if you want." His heart did a small flip. "I'd love to see it." 6 p.m.? She agreed, sending him an address. Adrian smoothed a hand over his suit jacket, deciding he might as well keep things casual. He changed into simpler clothes, dark jeans, a button-up shirt, no tie, no flash. He met Darcy outside a modest building on the edge of Lakeside's commercial district. A hand-painted sign read Lakeside Community Hub. She waited by the entrance, wearing sneakers, black leggings, and a light jacket. A swirl of excitement lit her expression when she saw him approach on foot. "Hey, city boy," she teased. "Brave enough to walk a few blocks, huh?" He grinned. "Wanted to blend in, but you're probably right, I'm too city now. Show me around?" She led him inside. The main area was a wide open space with worn linoleum floors, a few folding chairs and tables stacked with donated clothing. Posters on the walls advertised after-school tutoring, food drives, and job fairs. A handful of volunteers bustled about, sorting supplies. "This place used to be an abandoned grocery store," Darcy explained. "About 5 years ago, a local nonprofit bought it on the cheap, refurbished it. Now it's a hub for all sorts of community programs, youth sports sign-ups, adult literacy, even a small art workshop." Adrian scanned the space, imagining how it might be expanded or upgraded. He noticed a group of children in a corner working on crafts. "This is great," he said softly, "but it could use more funding, better equipment." She nodded, sighing. "Yeah, they rely on donations and small grants. Funds are always tight. The woman who runs it, Elena, is a saint, juggling a million tasks." As if on cue, a petite middle-aged woman approached. She wore a bright scarf and a warm smile. "Darcy, hi, and you must be—" Adrian extended a hand. "Adrian Cole, old friend of Darcy's." Elena's eyes glimmered with recognition. "Not the Adrian Cole from Cole Tech, are you?" He scratched his neck sheepishly. Yes, guilty." She let out a delighted laugh. "Well, I'll be. We've all heard about you, you know. The local boy who made it big. How nice to see you here." He felt a flush of pride and a hint of embarrassment. "I'm just visiting, seeing how I can help." Elena beamed, launching into stories about the community center's needs. New computers for the after-school program, a leaky roof, lack of funds to offer nutrition classes. Adrian listened carefully, making mental notes. Darcy watched him, her gaze thoughtful. Later, as they strolled outside, he turned to her. "Elena is amazing. The center is doing so much good with so little. I'd love to contribute in some way." Darcy tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm sure they'd be thrilled for any help. But don't feel obligated. You left the neighborhood for a reason, right?" He paused, stepping near a lamppost flickering overhead. "Yes, but I've realized turning my back on it forever isn't right. I have the means now. Maybe I can spark something here, create opportunities for the kids who were like me." Her eyes shone with admiration. "That's really good of you, Adrian." He shrugged, trying to downplay it. "It's what my mom would have wanted. She always said if I ever got the chance, I should give back." Darcy's expression softened. She reached for his hand briefly. "She'd be proud of you." Her touch radiated warmth he felt in his chest. After a moment, she let go, clearing her throat. "Anyway, if you want, I can help you meet some local businesses or city reps, show you potential areas for improvement. The more you see, the better you'll know how to help." Adrian smiled. "I'd appreciate that." They walked together down dimly lit streets, chatting about small things, childhood antics, local gossip, their respective day-to-day lives. Prosody, the ease with which they picked up their old rapport made Adrian's heart ache with a yearning he hadn't felt in years. By the time they parted ways outside her apartment building, the crisp night air carried a promise of something more than mere friendship rekindling. He watched her climb the steps to a modest second-floor unit, turning back to wave once before disappearing inside. His heart pounded. In business, he was methodical, strategic. But with Darcy, he felt a swirl of emotions he hadn't planned for, a sense of longing that tugged him back to simpler days. All he knew was that he wanted to spend more time with her, learn who she was now, and maybe, just maybe, find out if the closeness they once had could become something much deeper. In the following weeks, Adrian spent more time in Lakeside Heights than he did in his usual corporate towers. He held discreet meetings with city officials, local nonprofits, and small business owners to gauge the neighborhood's needs. Monica helped coordinate behind the scenes, but Adrian insisted on minimal media involvement. He wanted genuine insight, not photo ops. Darcy proved invaluable in connecting him to the community. She introduced him to Miss Franklin, the elementary school principal, who lamented outdated computers and limited art programs. They toured an abandoned factory that local entrepreneurs dreamed of converting into a shared workspace. Together, they visited an old recreational park where half the playground equipment was rusted or broken. Each evening, he and Darcy would debrief, often over simple meals at her place or at the diner. She'd cook pasta in her tiny kitchen, talking animatedly about design ideas for revitalizing empty storefronts. Adrian found himself enthralled not only by her creative mind, but also by her passion. She wasn't just living in Lakeside out of inertia, she believed in its potential. One day, they strolled down a worn footpath to a small lake on the neighborhood's edge. The water glistened under midday sun, though the shoreline was cluttered with debris and neglected docks. Adrian remembered fishing here as a boy, while mostly tangling the line, but it was a cherished memory nonetheless. "So how are things going with your philanthropic ideas?" Darcy asked, stepping over a broken branch. He sighed, scanning the shoreline. "A lot of red tape. The local council supports me in theory, but the city's budget is tight. I might have to directly fund some of the improvements, which is fine. I can afford it." Her lips curved. "Big spender, huh?" He shot her a mock glare. "Hey, I'm not just writing blank checks. I want to be strategic, provide grants that empower local initiatives, not just handouts." Darcy nodded thoughtfully, skipping a stone across the water. The ripples glinted in the sunlight. "That's wise. People here need a sense of ownership, not just charity. You could partner with existing organizations so they can scale up." He admired her insight. "Exactly. You should be a consultant on this. Your design skills, local knowledge. You're the perfect bridge between me and the neighborhood." She blinked, a hint of a blush crossing her cheeks. "I don't know. I'm just an interior designer, but I'd love to help." "Design thinking is bigger than paint colors," he pointed out. "You see potential in spaces, in people's homes. That same vision can apply to the community. I'd pay you, obviously." She let out a soft laugh. "Don't get me started on money. I'm struggling to keep my small business afloat, so yeah, I'd appreciate any legitimate gig." He placed a hand on her shoulder gently, turning her to face him. "Darcy, you're talented. Don't diminish that. I want you as a partner in this." The sincerity in his gaze made her eyes glisten. She smiled. "Okay, boss," she teased. "I'll be your local consultant." They exchanged a grin that lingered, something electric passing between them. His hand slid from her shoulder down her arm, fingers brushing against hers. A hush fell between them, broken only by the lapping water. He felt a powerful urge to draw her closer, taste the lips he'd once fantasized about in fleeting teenage daydreams. But he hesitated, unsure if she felt the same, uncertain about complicating their renewed friendship. Darcy cleared her throat, stepping back slightly. "Anyway, what's next on your big agenda, Mr. Cole?" He let out a breath, the moment dissipating. "I have some calls to make with the city's planning department, finalize a big donation for the community center." Prosody percent. "Then, there's a neighborhood block party next Saturday. I was thinking I might attend, maybe announce some good news." She perked up. "Oh, that's the annual fall festival on Maple Street, right? It's a big deal. I'll be there. Maybe we can, coordinate." He nodded, a flutter of excitement in his chest. "Absolutely. I'd love to see how the festival's changed. Remember how we used to compete in the bake-off?" A laugh burst from her. "Yes, and we always burned our cookies. But we ate them anyway." He joined her laughter, swirling with nostalgia. "Good times." They continued their walk, the tension of almost kisses replaced by a comfortable closeness. Adrian realized with each passing day that Darcy was more than a friend. She was quickly becoming the anchor in his old neighborhood and in his heart. He just had to figure out how to navigate these stirring feelings without jeopardizing what they'd built. Saturday arrived with crisp autumn air and bright sunshine. The Maple Street Fall Festival brought out the entire neighborhood. Families lugging toddlers, teens chatting in clusters, older folks in folding chairs tapping their toes to a local band. Booths lined the street, offering baked goods, handmade crafts, and raffle tickets. A few carnival-style games occupied the parking lot of an old church. Adrian, determined to blend in, wore simple jeans, sneakers, and a sweater. He still turned heads. Some recognized him from newspaper articles, others simply saw an unfamiliar face. But the vibe was warm and welcoming. He soon found Darcy at a booth for Miller Interiors. She was demonstrating simple do-it-yourself decor techniques for passersby, like painting pumpkins or refurbishing chairs. She wore a cozy flannel, hair tucked under a knit cap. When she spotted him, her face lit up with that radiant smile he was quickly becoming addicted to. "Hey, you," she greeted, leaning across the table for a friendly hug. "Glad you made it." He took in the bustling crowd. "This is bigger than I remember. I see live music, too." She grinned, pointing to a small stage where a local band strummed folksy tunes. "We've grown. Despite the neighborhood's issues, we know how to throw a festival." Adrian spent the next hour wandering around with Darcy, sampling fresh cider, cheering on kids at a ring toss booth, and admiring the local crafts. People recognized him more than he expected. Some approached to thank him for his success story, others asked about rumors of philanthropic projects. Darcy helped diffuse the attention with casual banter, ensuring no one overwhelmed him. Eventually, Elena from the community center climbed onto the small stage. She tapped the microphone. "Hello, Lakeside Heights. Before the band continues, we have a special announcement. Mr. Adrian Cole is here." Yes, that Adrian Cole, our own local success story. "Adrian, would you come up here?" Applause rippled through the crowd. Adrian felt a wave of self-consciousness. He shot Darcy a look, and she gave him a reassuring nudge. Reluctantly, he stepped onto the stage, taking the mic. He surveyed the crowd of expectant faces. The old him would have been shy, but the tech mogul had grown used to public speaking. Still, this felt personal. These were his roots. He cleared his throat. "Hi, everyone. It's good to be home after so long. I see a lot of familiar faces." He spotted some of his old teachers, neighbors, friends. Warmth welled in him. "I just wanted to say," he paused, searching for the right words. "I know Lakeside Heights has struggled, and I was lucky to break out and build something, but I haven't forgotten this place. So I'm announcing my commitment to invest in a series of neighborhood revitalization projects, upgrades to the community center, funding for after-school programs, small business grants, and hopefully more. I want to help make Lakeside Heights a place of opportunity for everyone." A roar of applause and cheers erupted. The crowd whooped, some chanting his name. Emotion clogged Adrian's throat. He continued, voice husky with feeling, "This is just the start. I'm working with local leaders, with folks like Alina, to figure out where best to direct resources. If you have ideas, talk to me. This is our home." More clapping and a few whistles. Stepping down from the stage, he was mobbed by well-wishers shaking his hand, hugging him. Kids asked for pictures. He posed politely, though all he really wanted was to find Darcy's face in the sea of people. Finally, he spotted her standing at the edge of the crowd, a brilliant smile lighting her features. Once he broke free of the throng, he joined her. Without hesitation, she threw her arms around him. "That was incredible," she murmured, eyes shining with pride. He returned the hug, inhaling the scent of her hair. "I meant every word." She pulled back just enough to meet his gaze the moment charged. "Adrian, you are so much more than a billionaire. You're caring, genuine." He cupped her cheek, heart pounding. "I'm just trying to do the right thing." Their eyes locked, that unspoken tension flaring again. The festival noise faded to a dull roar. Adrian felt a pulse of courage. He leaned in, lips hovering near hers. She didn't pull away, her eyes fluttered shut, breath catching. Before they could close the distance, someone from the crowd shouted Darcy's name, needing help at her booth. She jumped, stepping back, cheeks flushing. I have to go. Sorry." He exhaled slowly, reeling from the near kiss. "It's okay. We'll talk later?" She nodded, biting her lip. "Yes, definitely." Then she darted off, leaving Adrian standing there, adrenaline pumping in his veins. They'd nearly kissed in broad daylight, surrounded by half the neighborhood. He had no doubt she felt the connection too. He spent the rest of the festival in a daze, fielding questions about his new investment plans, congratulating local raffle winners, signing the occasional autograph for kids. But his thoughts circled back to Darcy, the warmth of her embrace, the longing in her eyes. By nightfall, the festival wound down. Adrian found Darcy packing up her booth, stacking leftover pamphlets about Miller Interiors. She shot him a tired grin. "Hey, sorry I ran off." He waved it aside. "No worries. You were in demand." They worked together to load her supplies into her small hatchback. The lampposts cast golden pools of light across the street. Once done, they stood by the car, an awkward hush descending. Darcy fiddled with her keys. "So, about earlier." He took a step closer. "Yeah?" She glanced at him, uncertain. But maybe we should talk about what's happening here." His heart thumped. "I think we both know there's more than friendship at play." She laughed softly, a shaky sound. "Well, yeah. You've come back into my life like a whirlwind. It's amazing and terrifying. Our worlds are so different." He gently took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I know, but I can't ignore what I feel. I missed you all these years, Darcy, even if I didn't realize it. Now that you're here, I want to see where this goes." Her eyes misted with emotion. "I do too, but I'm scared. You're this big deal mogul. I'm just me. I don't want to become a footnote in your glamorous life or have everyone assume I'm after your money." He cupped her cheek, voice earnest. "You're not just you. You're Darcy, the girl who believed in me when no one else cared about my silly coding, the friend who always cheered me on. If people think something else, they don't matter. I'm not letting you go again." A tear slipped down her cheek, and she let out a breathless laugh. "You sure know how to deliver a speech." "Occupational hazard," he murmured, leaning closer. This time, no one interrupted. Their lips met in a soft, lingering kiss. He tasted a hint of cinnamon from the festival cider, felt her relax into him, arms looping around his neck. Warmth flooded him, like coming home in every sense. When they finally broke apart, she pressed her forehead against his, breathing unsteadily. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's try this, but promise me we'll take it slow, figure out how to balance our worlds." He nodded, heart buoyant. "I promise." They shared a few more tender kisses, the street deserted now, save for a few drifting festival goers. Hand in hand, they walked to his car. He opened the door for her, letting her slip into the passenger seat. That night, they drove around the neighborhood under starry skies, talking about everything and nothing, weaving old memories with new dreams. By the time he dropped her off at her apartment, they'd solidified a plan to explore this fragile, blossoming love, no matter how improbable it seemed to the outside world. Over the next month, Darcy and Adrian navigated a flurry of newness. Adrian's philanthropic projects ramped up. He donated computers to the elementary school, funded repairs at the community center, and unveiled a plan to transform the abandoned factory into a business incubator. Media caught wind, praising tech mogul Adrian Cole's philanthropic return to his hometown, though he tried to keep coverage modest. Meanwhile, Darcy became his de facto consultant, brainstorming design solutions for refurbished spaces. She introduced him to local volunteers, orchestrated paint days, and pulled him into hands-on projects. He learned how to wield a paint roller properly, with comedic mishaps, while she teased him about his delicate billionaire hands. At first, the neighborhood welcomed the improvements, but a few skeptics worried Adrian's changes would push out long-term residents or raise rent prices. Darcy helped reassure them, insisting his approach was about empowering the current community, not attracting wealthy outsiders. Adrian took their concerns to heart, adjusting strategies to protect affordable housing. In private, he and Darcy grew closer, sharing late-night calls, stolen kisses during lunch breaks, quiet dinners in each other's homes. They learned each other's present realities, her freelance hustle, his grueling business calls at odd hours. She discovered that under his confident exterior, he wrestled with loneliness. He'd spent years shielded by corporate walls and superficial acquaintances. He found that beneath her cheerful nature, she sometimes felt overshadowed by family expectations or the fear of failing her clients. One evening, Darcy invited Adrian to meet her parents. They lived in a modest, single-story home a few blocks from the diner. She warned him that her dad could be blunt and her mom protective. Adrian arrived with flowers for her mother, an earnest smile on his face. Her parents greeted him politely, though her father gave him a critical once-over. Over a home-cooked meal, they asked about his philanthropic plans, his lifestyle, and how serious he was about their daughter. Adrian answered honestly, ignoring the swirl of nerves. Darcy's mother beamed at his sincerity, while her father eventually grunted approval, grudgingly admitting he was impressed with Adrian's dedication to Lakeside. When they left, Darcy teased Adrian about how stiff he'd looked under her dad's glare. He laughed, relieved the encounter went decently. "He loves you," Adrian said quietly. "He just wants to make sure I'm not taking advantage." Her eyes softened. "I know. Thanks for humoring him." Around the same time, Adrian invited Darcy to a Coltech charity gala in the city, a black tie affair to benefit STEM education for underprivileged youth. Darcy hesitated, uncomfortable about stepping into his glamorous sphere, but she ultimately agreed, seeing it as a chance to support his cause. On the night of the gala, Darcy arrived at Adrian's penthouse to carpool. He greeted her at the door, breath hitching at the sight of her in a sleek midnight blue gown. She wore minimal jewelry, letting her natural beauty shine. "You look stunning," he murmured, kissing her cheek. She blushed. "You're not so bad yourself," she teased, eyeing his tailored tuxedo. "I feel like Cinderella." He squeezed her hand. "You belong anywhere you want to be." They drove to the venue, an upscale hotel ballroom, dripping with chandeliers and polished marble floors. Cameras flashed as they stepped onto a small red carpet. Darcy stiffened under the attention, but Adrian kept a protective arm around her waist. Inside, wealthy philanthropists and corporate executives mingled over champagne. Darcy tried to stay poised, though she admitted feeling out of place amid the glitz. Adrian introduced her to colleagues, explaining that Darcy was spearheading design and community outreach for his lakeside projects. Some offered polite smiles. A few asked pointed questions about her background. Darcy handled it with grace, though she occasionally squeezed Adrian's arm, her silent signal she needed reassurance. A mild scandal threatened to erupt when a gossip columnist recognized Darcy as the billionaire's small-town girlfriend. She asked snarky questions about Darcy's intentions, implying she might be gold-digging. Darcy flushed, but Adrian stepped in calmly, shutting the commentary down. Later, Darcy retreated to the balcony with him, venting frustrations about the assumptions people made. He held her close against the chill night air, pressing a comforting kiss to her temple. "Ignore them. I know who you are. That's all that matters." She exhaled shakily. "I'm trying, but it's tough. I don't want to be the subject of tabloid gossip." He brushed a thumb across her cheek. "Me neither. Let them talk. Our truth is stronger." Her eyes glistened, but she nodded. "Okay." They returned to the gala, dancing a slow waltz under the shimmering lights. Darcy leaned into him, and Adrian felt a fierce protectiveness for this woman who had reawakened his heart. He realized he didn't just want to date Darcy, he wanted a future with her, something real and lasting. But the question loomed, was it too soon to consider marriage, a life together bridging two vastly different backgrounds? He vowed to be patient, nurturing their bond step by step. Yet as the gala ended, Darcy's head resting on his shoulder in the limo, he couldn't shake the sense that fate was pushing them towards something monumental, perhaps even a promise of forever. Just when life seemed bright, the neighborhood faced a crisis. A sudden fire broke out in an old apartment complex near the industrial zone, displacing several low-income families. The building had outdated wiring, no sprinklers. Tragedy loomed as the structure partially collapsed. Thankfully, no fatalities, but many lost their homes. Adrian sprang into action, allocating emergency funds for temporary housing, working with local officials to expedite repairs. Darcy joined him, rallying volunteers and sourcing donations for clothes and essentials. They spent long days coordinating relief efforts, the heartbreak fueling them to do more. One evening, after hours of distributing blankets and food at the community center, Darcy slumped into a folding chair, exhaustion etched on her face. Adrian knelt beside her, gently rubbing her shoulders. "You've been incredible," he murmured. "We're making a difference." She nodded wearily. "But it's not enough. These families need safe, permanent places to go." He squeezed her hand. "I'm in talks with a developer about renovating some vacant lots into affordable housing. Might take time, but we'll push it through." Tears pricked her eyes. "Thank you, Adrian, for everything. I don't know if I ever told you how proud I am of who you've become, how you're helping." A lump formed in his throat. "Hearing that from you means more than I can say." That night, at her apartment, they tried to unwind with a simple dinner, but the weight of the day clung to them. Darcy stepped away to the kitchen sink, washing dishes silently. Adrian joined her, drying plates. He caught a glimpse of tears slipping down her cheek. Without thinking, he turned off the tap, gently pulling her into a hug. She buried her face in his chest, letting out a quiet sob. "I hate seeing people suffer. Growing up here, we always wanted better. Now there's more tragedy." He stroked her hair. "We'll fix it. I promise. I'm not leaving until this place is on a better track." She sniffled, pulling back, gaze searching his. "You'd really stay here?" His voice was firm. "I'm setting up a more permanent presence in Lakeside, a local coal tech office, an ongoing philanthropic foundation. This is home, Darcy. If that means we can be together too, I want it." Her eyes glistened. "Adrian, that means so much." She paused, emotions swirling. "But your empire is bigger than this neighborhood. You have responsibilities, stockholders," he shrugged. "I can juggle, hire more executives, trust my leadership team. Being present here doesn't mean I abandon the rest." She nodded slowly, a small smile forming. "Then I'm with you, every step." He pressed a tender kiss to her lips, relief flooding him. They clung to each other, leaning against the counter, hearts beating in sync. In the days that followed, they poured energy into the relief efforts. The crisis, while devastating, galvanized the neighborhood, and Adrian's philanthropic presence increased goodwill among locals. Darcy's interior design skills were tapped to transform an unused warehouse into temporary housing units. They worked side by side, often collapsing in exhaustion each night, but buoyed by each other's company. At the same time, Adrian began to realize that life with Darcy wasn't just about shared projects. It was about building a family, a future. Every time he glimpsed her caring for displaced children, coordinating volunteers, or falling asleep on his shoulder mid-conversation, a deep certainty rooted in his soul. She was the woman he wanted by his side forever. 3 months after Adrian's return, Lakeside Heights showed visible signs of renewal. The community center boasted new facilities, local entrepreneurs thrived in the incubator, and the foundation Adrian set up promised long-term growth. Residents were cautiously optimistic. In the midst of these transformations, Adrian planned a personal milestone. He'd found a ring, a timeless, elegant piece reflecting Darcy's understated grace. He arranged a day trip with her, claiming they needed to inspect an old park outside the neighborhood for potential improvements. Instead, he guided her to their childhood lake, the same spot where they'd walked weeks ago. Twilight painted the sky in oranges and purples, the water's surface shimmered. Adrian parked the car, leading Darcy along a newly cleared path. Volunteers had removed the debris, installed benches. She marveled at the subtle renovations. "Wow, it's beautiful," she breathed. "Did you do this?" He shrugged, heart thumping. "I might have funded a cleanup, but it was a community effort." They paused by a wooden dock overlooking the water, the gentle sound of lapping waves enveloping them. Darcy leaned against the railing, her hair swaying in the breeze. Adrian drew closer, fingers trembling around the small velvet box in his pocket. He cleared his throat. "Darcy, I wanted to bring you here because this lake holds memories of our childhood. Fishing, skipping stones, dreaming big. We've come full circle now." She turned, a soft smile on her lips. "It's surreal, isn't it? How far we've come, yet how familiar this place feels." He inhaled, adrenaline surging. "Meeting you again changed everything. I've never felt more alive, more grounded. You bring out the best in me, and seeing the way you care for this neighborhood, it inspires me to be better." Her eyes glimmered with emotion. "Adrian," he took her hands. "Darcy Miller, I love you. Completely. These past months proved to me that we belong together, sharing dreams, supporting each other's passions, building a future in this place we call home." He dropped to one knee, producing the ring box, flipping it open. Inside, a delicate diamond set in a simple band sparkled in the fading light. Will you marry me? Be my partner? My wife? Forever? Darcy's breath caught, tears welling in her eyes. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, nodding vigorously before words emerged. Yes, yes, Adrian, I'll marry you. Relief and elation flooded him. He slipped the ring onto her finger, stood, and swept her into a fierce hug. Laughter bubbled between their kisses, the dock creaking under their shifting weight. The wind rustled leaves as if nature itself applauded their union. They broke apart, foreheads touching, hearts racing. I can't believe this is happening, Darcy whispered, giddy tears on her cheeks. I'm going to be Mrs. Adrian Cole. He chuckled, brushing a tear away. You can keep your last name if you want. I just want you by my side. She laughed through her tears. You're stuck with me now. They gazed out over the water, hands entwined, imagining a shared future. A wedding, a home in Lakeside, continuing their work to uplift the community. Maybe children one day who would grow up without the same struggles they had. In that quiet lakeside moment, all the differences between billionaire and small-town designer melted away, overshadowed by a love that began in childhood and found its true bloom in this season of second chances. They sealed their promise with another tender kiss, content that the road ahead, though not without challenges, would be walked hand in hand. The wedding took place 6 months later, right in Lakeside Heights. Darcy and Adrian refused a posh city venue or an exclusive resort. Instead, they transformed the old community center's event hall, sprucing it up with Darcy's design flair. The entire neighborhood pitched in. Someone donated flowers, another volunteered to cater, the local band from the fall festival performed. On a sunny afternoon, Darcy donned a simple ivory gown that highlighted her bright smile. Adrian wore a tailored suit, but no tie, determined to keep things comfortable. Family and friends filled the folding chairs, including former teachers, neighbors, and some high-profile colleagues from Coltech who were charmed by the heartfelt community vibe. As Darcy walked down the makeshift aisle, a hush fell, broken only by soft music. Adrian's heart pounded at the sight of her, eyes brimming with awe. Memories of their childhood flickered in his mind, culminating in this moment of profound love. They exchanged vows that spoke of shared history and hope for the future, promising to lift each other up. Darcy's father wept openly. Her mother beamed. When they kissed to seal their marriage, the room erupted in cheers, kids blowing bubbles and confetti sprinkling the air. A reception followed, a joyous mix of potluck dishes and DJ'd music. Adrian and Darcy cut a simple cake, fed each other slices while the crowd whistled. Laughter and dancing went long into the evening, culminating in a twinkling send-off under strings of lights. As they departed in a decorated classic car, courtesy of a local mechanic who insisted on helping, the bride and groom looked out the window at the cheering neighbors, friends, and family. Darcy squeezed Adrian's hand, gazing into his eyes with a grin. "Ready to start our new life?" she asked, voice soft. He leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers. "I've been ready since the day I came home and found you." She kissed him, the crowd's applause echoing. In the days that followed, Adrian continued to expand his philanthropic work in Lakeside, now with Darcy by his side as both wife and partner. They settled into a restored craftsman house near the lake, merging her cozy, creative touches with his modern tech. Soon, rumors of an upcoming family blossomed, though they insisted on letting life unfold at its own pace. Every so often, they'd steal away to the old dock at the lake, reminiscing about their journey. From childhood pals with big dreams to adults forging an even bigger reality. And whenever they needed a reminder of how far they'd come, they simply looked at the vibrant, thriving neighborhood around them, living proof that love, hope, and a little generosity could reshape the world. And in that small corner of the city, the boy who left to conquer the tech world and the girl who dreamed of beautifying everything around her found their happily ever after. It was more than a wedding, more than a philanthropic triumph. It was a testament to the power of returning home, to the roots that anchor the heart, and to the childhood friend who became a bride, sharing a future that sparkled like the lake at sunset.